Hi everyone. Good morning. Good morning for me anyway. In this overview video, as we usually do, I will look at this week's activities and tasks and readings on the course calendar here, and then I'll go through and briefly hit some of the highlights from the assignments. So here we are in week 5, you can believe that, very rapidly approaching the halfway point of the term. One thing that I want to bring to your attention this week is that up to this point, a lot of our readings and discussion boards, we've been able to apply those ideas directly to the assignments that we're working on. That's not entirely the case here in week 5. So what's happening in week 5, first, I guess let's look at what we're turning in. Week 5 is the final week in which we are finishing and finalizing the Entering the Conversation project. So by Wednesday of this week, we are taking all of the feedback we've received on our draft, and we're coming up with a plan, an actionable plan, right? We're doing what we learned good writers do with feedback. We're selecting and prioritizing the feedback we've received and coming up with some sort of actionable plan to finish, to finish strong, to create the best final draft of the Entering the Conversation argument that we can. So by Wednesday, we're going to come up with that plan. We'll look at it in just a moment, but we're just going to be answering some prompts about what feedback we're going to use and how. Then, of course, by Sunday, we're turning in the Entering the Conversation essay. This is the culmination, the sort of keystone of this entire project. This is what we've been working toward for the last 5 weeks. It's worth 100 points. It's our most high-stakes assignment yet. And then also on Sunday or soon thereafter, we are going to reflect on our Entering the Conversation essay. So just note that this ETC essay reflection memo is going to be, it should be done after you've completed the essay. And this is another sort of small, lower stakes reflection memo. So those are the three assignments that we'll overview here. Of course, we're doing our week 5 discussion boards. Our Wednesday and Sunday contributions are going to be contributed as normal. So, however, although we're finishing up the ETC project in our assignments, I guess outside of class, so to speak, we are in class, we are sort of moving forward, and we are doing some readings that are laying the foundation for our next project, the Discourse Community Report. We're sort of returning to our focus on discourse communities, and how those discourse communities use language, writing, literacy, or those other features of discourse community, genre, and lexis. So we'll address this thoroughly. This is addressed thoroughly in my week 5 threshold concepts video below. This is addressed thoroughly above in the week 5 overview text. We're really going to hit this idea of discourse with a capital D hard in our discussion board this week. But all I want to point out right now is that we sort of have our in-class ideas, which is what we're reading about and what we're discussing, and then sort of outside of class, we are finishing the ETC project. So unlike previous weeks, we're not necessarily going to be using these ideas that we're learning and applying them to our assignments. Kind of outside of class, I'm leaving you of your own accord to finish strong with all of those ideas and applying those ideas and concepts we've been focusing on and working so hard on for the last 5 weeks. So those ideas of, a specific narrow thesis that moves the conversation forward, that doesn't just echo what others have said, incorporating research in a clear way, applying citation conventions appropriately, explicit argumentation. All of those ideas we're sort of applying in our final push toward finishing the ETC conversation, entering the conversation project. So the revision plan that we're going to do for Wednesday, it's an opportunity for you to take the feedback you've received and to create a plan that sets you up to succeed in entering the conversation argument. So this is an informal sort of, this is for your use largely, so you can copy and paste and reply to these prompts as you see fit. But right, we should all be selecting, prioritizing, and reflecting on the feedback that we've received. Basically, the first question we need to ask is, not all feedback is created equal. As we know, we don't need to take all of the feedback into account. We still have agency as writers. We still get to say, after we've reflected thoroughly, we still get to say, no, I don't think I'm going to do that. I don't think that's a good idea. Or yes, I can see now that the reader really needs this information to make those connections, whatever. So first step is to select and prioritize the feedback that we want to include in our revisions. The rest of these prompts, I've written here that you can answer these by reflecting on feedback, or right at this point we're far enough away from our draft, we've gotten feedback on it. I think we can trust our own impression of the feedback, or excuse me, we can trust our own impression of the draft as well. So if there's a question that you don't want to refer to feedback on, and you just want to assess the draft yourself, that's fine. You can answer the remaining prompts here however you see fit. This is worth 25 points. The goal, of course, is to have on paper numerous specific applicable steps that we can put into action to come up with a great final draft here. Of course, the goal of the Entering the Conversation revision plan is, this is our end goal here, the Entering the Conversation argument. We went over this assignment in week 1, I believe. We've been working towards it for the last 5 weeks, so I won't belabor it. I won't repeat myself here. We know that our audience is going to expect thorough, explicit argumentation. We have claims, we have evidence, and we have warrants. We have that reasoning that shows how the evidence we've provided supports our claims. Our readers will expect the essay to be organized, paragraphed, titled in a way that makes sense and ultimately focuses on our thesis. The reader's going to expect grammar, mechanics, spelling, and punctuation, the sentence level issues, in a way that are well organized and help create meaning rather than they help clarify meaning rather than impede meaning for the reader. And because we are writing in the academy, a consistent academic formatting and citation style of your choice. Of course, included within that is the expectation that you will be very clear and explicit about which ideas are your own and which ideas you've borrowed from others. Of course, if you forget to mention that an idea that you've borrowed, if you forget to mention you've borrowed an idea from Kenneth Burke, and it just shows up in your paper without any signaling, any citation that it comes from elsewhere, that's accidental plagiarism perhaps, but it's still plagiarism. We've got to be really careful. Our reader is going to assume, unless you explicitly say this comes from Kenneth Burke, page 231, that it's your idea. So we've got to be really careful about signaling that these ideas or research or specific words come from another spot, come from someplace else. Yeah, and we can see those are kind of the same. These are the criteria that are guiding our rubric. Good claims, clear argumentation, well-integrated research, well-integrated and well-cited research, and clear organization, formatting, and sentence level issues. And again, if you don't understand what some of these central goals are in the week 5 in the capstone of the Entering the Conversation Argument project, I think it's really worth your time to ask me or ask the class in that in the Ask Questions Here discussion board. So I've been calling this one the capstone, which I still am going to be calling it the capstone, but it's not technically the last thing we're going to do, because if you haven't learned yet in this class, we are going to be reflecting a lot. So after you finished that big, high stakes, fully edited, formal piece of writing, we're going to do one more reflection, similar to the reflection we did in week 4. But as we learned in week 4, as we learned, I think, in the first week, we're ending this class with a final reflective portfolio that ultimately asks us to collect some samples of the writing we've done and make an argument about how that writing, we're going to use that writing as evidence to support claims about our own learning, to support claims about how we met or didn't meet the learning outcomes for this class. So this is another good opportunity for us to do one of these mini reflections that will help scaffold that assignment for us. Of course, this is intended to be completed after you've finished the project, after you finished that ETC argument. Our task here, this is differently from the week 4 reflection, is that we know that we'll be asked to collect, select, and reflect on the writing we've done throughout the term. In short, we're asked to provide, using our own writing as evidence, we're asked to prove that we have met or haven't met the learning outcomes for this course. And how are we going to prove that? Well, the way we prove everything in academic writing. We're going to make a claim. Yes, I've met this outcome. I learned to apply concepts from writing and rhetoric to identify and analyze complex real-world rhetorical situations. We're going to supply some evidence. Look at this excerpt from my, look at this conclusion I drew from my discourse community report assignment, and we're going to include a warrant or reasoning and say, as you can see, the fact that I was able to argue that the lexis of the bodybuilding community belays its values. It shows that its values are becoming more accepting of performance-enhancing drugs. That is how I applied the idea of lexis to analyze this real-world rhetorical concept of the bodybuilding, this real-world rhetorical situation of bodybuilding community's lexis. So, differently from last week, our goals here are to provide evidence from our own writing. So first thing I want you to do is choose from 3 of these learning outcomes. We may not choose 3 that you think you can prove with writing you've already done. We're not done with this course, so maybe you can't, in fact, you certainly can't have met them all. Choose 3 that you think you can prove. And then secondly, select the 3 pieces of writing that you've done this term that you're going to use as evidence. Right? And this can be any writing. If you're going to make an argument that you learned to provide constructive peer feedback, you would probably want to choose some of the feedback you gave to your peers in week 4 and week 5. And 3, just make an explicit argument that shows how your evidence supports the claim you're learning. Yes, I learned to give constructive peer feedback. Here's an example of that constructive peer feedback. My warrant is you can see how this meets the criteria of constructive peer feedback because it's not just editing, it focuses on goals, etc., etc., etc. The earlier we do this now, the better situated we're going to be for that final reflective portfolio at the end of the term.